Senator Obama, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
On becoming the de facto Democratic nominee.
Thank you.
As you know, the night you'll accept your party's nomination is the 45th anniversary of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech.
Mm-hmm.
What would that mean to you?
Well, it's a powerful coincidence, but obviously you think about the road we've traveled as a country since that speech was made, and it's a testimony to what's best about America. We have gone through fits and starts and twists and turns, but we have made a lot of progress in not just in issues of racial justice, but just opening up opportunity to everybody. I mean, you think about the race that I have been involved with and the remarkable achievements of Senator Clinton. My daughters are going to look at their possibilities differently because of the race she ran, and I think there are a lot of little boys and little girls who are African American, but also Hispanic and Indian American, and from all different cultures who are saying this is what this country is about, and so that's gratifying.
From I Have a Dream to the idea of a dream ticket, I'm told you had a chance encounter today with Senator Clinton. What did the two of you discuss?
We just reemphasized the need for us to sit down and talk. I'm a big believer in having direct conversations as opposed to trying to have surrogates and press and gossip and this and that.
So what did you say, call me?
Yeah, we're going to set something up, and I'm looking forward to talking to her. And she just ran a great race. She is obviously one of the most effective public servants that we have and have had in a long time. And so, I'm looking forward to figuring out how best we can work together. I'm absolutely confident that she loves this country, she loves this party, and we are going to be unified in November to win the White House.
Right now, though, there are a lot of very disappointed Hillary Clinton supporters.
Sure. Well, absolutely. Look, if the situation were reversed, there'd be a lot of disappointed Obama supporters, and I understand that.
How will you win them over, though?
Well, I do think it's important not to overstate this. I mean, John McCain in 2000, when he dropped out, there were all these McCain supporters said, we'll never vote for Bush. And then they started focusing on the issues and the differences in the two parties. And by the time it was all over, almost all of John McCain's voters voted for George Bush. The same, I'm not suggesting that I can take this for granted. I think we've got to reach out to women and make sure that they know my track record on issues that are of importance to women. I think it's important that I reach out, and so that working class voters can say to themselves, boy, this is a guy who's been fighting for me for a long time. And so we're not going to take it for granted, but I do think that when they start looking at the contrast between where I stand on issues and John McCain stands on issues, when they say Barack wants to create universal health care and John McCain doesn't, when they look and say Barack wants to provide tax cuts to the middle class and John McCain wants to provide $300 billion in new tax cuts to corporations, those are going to be big contrasts, and that's what people are going to make decisions on. I think women are going to say, the next president's going to probably make at least a couple Supreme Court appointments. That's going to be a very important issue for them. So my sense is by November we're going to have worked out a lot of the memories of this primary contest, and we're going to really be thinking about where do we need to take the country.
In our latest poll, 59% of Democratic primary voters, including 46% of your voters, think you should select Senator Clinton to be your running mate. So in the spirit of Kennedy picking Johnson and Reagan choosing Bush, why not pick Senator Clinton? And please don't tell me it's premature to ask that question.
Well, it's not premature to ask. It's premature to answer because I literally got the nomination last night. So we're going to go through a process. We've got a committee that's going to go through all the names. The truth is that I haven't had enough time to think through how we want to approach this selection process entirely, but it's going to be deliberate. This is an important decision. It's not one that I take lightly. It's not one that you want to make in the heat of the moment right after you got out of a nomination. And so we're going to take our time. Senator Clinton would be on anybody's short list, obviously.
So you're not ruling her out?
No, but what I'm saying is that we're going to go through a deliberate process and think this thing through, because the person who's my vice president is not just going to be campaigning with me. That person is going to be helping to govern, and if something, heaven forbid, happened to me, would end up being president. And that's a decision I take very, very seriously.
As you know, a lot of it is about chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
So just now, sitting here talking about it, do you think you're chemically compatible? I'm serious. I mean, can you see working with her, or does it just make you think, ugh, no?
No. Look, Senator Clinton is somebody who I've worked with in the past. We agree on 95%, maybe 99% of issues.
But what about chemistry, Senator?
Well, chemistry is a combination of things. A lot of it just has to do with how much work you put into it. But look, the point is,
it's also about liking someone,
yeah,
right?
Well, I like Senator Clinton. She is a passionate person on behalf of the things she cares about. She loves this country. When I listen to her talk about health care, for example, I believe her. She wants to deliver health care for every American, as do I. And I respect her for that. But as I said, there's going to be a lot of time. You're going to have a whole bunch of angles that you can try to get me to answer this question. We're going to go through a very systematic process. And by the time of the convention, I'll have a nominee. How's that?
But it's fair to say at this point in time, you're not ruling her out.
I'm not ruling anybody out. Anybody who's of age and in politics and might be a credible president.
You watched Hillary Clinton's speech last night. Did it disappoint you, Senator, that she didn't recognize fully this milestone that you had hit?
I think that when you've gone through 54 contests and the race has been this close and hard fought, it takes some time to sink in. And she was in New York. A lot of her supporters had flown in. I can only imagine sort of the things I'd be going through, and obviously she wanted, most importantly, to remind her supporters of what an amazing feat they had accomplished. And so I didn't spend too much time worrying about that.
We described you last night as limping across the finish line. Because you hit the magic number for the nomination, but you barely won the popular vote, and you lost most of the big states. So do you think you're going in to this general election from a position of strength?
Absolutely, because I think this country badly wants change. I mean, keep in mind, those states that I lost are to a fellow Democrat who is extraordinarily popular and brought unprecedented assets to the race. There aren't too many people who, after you win 11 straight times, then goes and raises $35 million. And yet, in those same big states, for example, in Pennsylvania, polls are showing me up over John McCain by 8 points. Because I think that the Democratic message, making sure that everybody has health care, making sure that we are, in a responsible way, getting out of Iraq, delivering on the promise of clean energy and the jobs that it can create. On those issues, I think the Democrats have the better vision for where the country is going to go. And as people listen to the debate between myself and John McCain on these issues, I think we're going to do very well.
Last night, Senator McCain said he does not, in fact, represent a third term for President Bush. He says he's broken with the president on things like climate change, torture, energy legislation, and the initial U.S. strategy in Iraq. So is it really fair to say he's another George Bush, or is that just a snappy campaign slogan?
No. I mean, keep in mind, if you listen to my speech, I acknowledged that in the past, John McCain has shown independence from his party. but I was also very specific that on the two central issues that we face as a country, number one, how do we keep this country safe? And number two, how do we build an economy that works for all? That John McCain and George Bush have almost identical approaches. I mean, if you look at John McCain's Iraq strategy currently, I would defy you to find a glimmer of light between their two policies. They want to continue the war. They believe in not talking to our adversaries. And in fact, John McCain brags about that. And in terms of him having differences with George Bush on Iraq, that frankly is just some revisionist history. He was one of the biggest cheerleaders about us going into Iraq. He might have had
problems with the way the war was executed.
Well, everybody had serious problems with that. But I think that on the big strategic question of whether we should invade a country that had nothing to do with 9/11, John McCain was right there. Now, on the economy, John McCain's primary agenda is his big centerpiece economic plan. He released it several months ago, was to continue the Bush tax cuts and to double down with $300 billion in additional tax cuts for corporations, which, by the way, aren't paid for. And he says they're paid for by earmarks, except the only problem is earmarks only account for $18 billion. So even if you eliminated all of those, you'd still have a pretty long way to go. And that is George Bush's economic policy. His health care policy is almost identical to George Bush's. He wants to give some tax credits, but doesn't want to crack down on insurance companies, certainly will not assure universal coverage. Every expert would acknowledge that. So on the big issues, on the important issues of how we grow this economy and make it work for all people, and how we deal with Iraq and the threat of terrorism and keeping America safe, he and George Bush are identical. That is not to take away from his very legitimate claims that he was independent on torture. I give him credit for that, and I did last night. I think that he deserves credit for breaking on climate change. I'm glad that he recognized the importance of that issue before George Bush did. So again, Mike, I think John McCain is a fine public servant, and I think that he's accomplished good things in his work in the Senate. But in terms of where we want to take the country on the critical issues that we face, I think it is entirely fair to say that he wants to perpetuate the same policies that we've had over the last 8 years.
He claims he's more of a uniter than you are, and that you've never stood up to your party while he has. Can you give me an example, Senator, of when you broke with the Democrats in Washington to do what you thought was right?
Sure. In my first year, I voted for a tort reform bill because I thought that the court process was being abused. The trial lawyers were very unhappy with me. I was only one of a handful of Democrats who voted that way, but I thought it was the right thing to do. Now, the fact of the matter is that I have a history of bipartisanship both in the United States Senate and in the state legislature when I was in Illinois that I would put up against John McCain's any time. I would also point out that it's a lot easier to be bipartisan when you control a lot of the votes. And a lot of times when I vote against Republican initiatives, those are bills that are not designed to solve problems where we've actually had the opportunity to work things out. They're designed to score political points, and you end up having very polarized votes simply because there hasn't been an intention to actually bring people together to get things done.
Is there anything President Bush has done that you consider good and would want to continue?
Absolutely. I'll give you a very specific example. I think that George Bush has done an extraordinary job in expanding AIDS funding and working with countries, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, to save hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of lives. The PEPFAR program, which is the main program to deal with HIV/AIDS in Africa, has been a significant success of this administration. They deserve enormous credit for it. They made a promise that they were going to do something about it. They followed through on it. You know, people on the ground when I traveled in Africa during my trip a couple of years ago could see a real difference. You had a great working relationship between the CDC and local governments, and so I'm very proud of that work. The President deserves great credit for it, and I actually want to expand and build on the work that's been done.
Do you have any plans to visit Iraq anytime soon?
I do.
And when was the last time you were there?
Well, it's been a couple of years, and so I expect that we will be taking a foreign trip that will include Iraq sometime between now and November. And obviously I've been getting firsthand reports about what's going on there. In fact, my chief foreign policy advisor is a naval reservist and was assigned there for the last 6 months. He just got back, and so I've been studying very carefully and getting all the briefings about what's taking place. But I think it's a good time for me to talk to the troops firsthand.
I was listening to a Republican consultant on one of the cable networks while I was waiting to do this interview, and she was once again mentioning the fact that during that debate you said you would, without preconditions, meet with Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Do you think that will continue to hound you during the course of this campaign?
I don't think it will hound me, because I'll bring it up. I mean, there was a survey done yesterday that once again showed the majority of Americans agree with my belief that we should talk not just to our friends but to our enemies.
Without preconditions at the highest levels?
Well, see, this is the problem. I mean, it is continually misreported how exactly I would approach this.
But you have backpedaled, with all due respect, Senator.
No, I haven't backpedaled. What happens is, that I was asked in a debate where you've got 30 seconds what I would do, and I would meet without preconditions. That does not mean that I wouldn't prepare for a meeting, and that doesn't mean it starts at the highest levels, right? What I've consistently said is that, for example, with Iran, it's important for us to initiate direct talks, tough diplomacy, indicating to them that if they back off nuclear weapons, if they stop funding terrorism, if they stop threatening Israel, then there are carrots for changes in behavior.
That sounds like preconditions, no?
No, because what happens with the Bush administration is their attitude is we won't even talk until they take all those steps that we want. Well, those aren't negotiations. That's how this administration has used the term preconditions. We won't talk to you unless you do everything that we say, and that presumably would be the subject of negotiation. So my simple point has been, we won't know if negotiations can be successful if we never try them. And it would start at lower levels. We would only do it if it was in the interest of the United States and if we thought we could make some progress. But what we wouldn't do is say, you give in to everything that we want, and then we will deign to talk to you. That can't be how diplomacy works. It's not how Reagan operated. It's not how previous presidents like Kennedy or Truman operated. It's not how I will operate when I'm President of the United States.
But you can see they will use this against you in some capacity.
I guess what I'm saying is I will use it against them because I think they're wrong on this, and I think the American people understand that unless we restore diplomacy, then we are not going to be successful. Now, if you're saying to me that I expect that the other side will distort my record on a whole host of things to try to win the election, absolutely.
We began this interview talking about how historic your nomination is. The first African American to win his party's nomination, or her party's nomination, is extremely historic. But during the primaries, there was a real racial divide, as you know, in some states like Pennsylvania and Kentucky. How concerned are you, Senator, that racism may rear its ugly head in this general election?
You know, I've said this before, and I continue to believe it. And if I didn't believe it, I wouldn't have run. And if I wasn't at least right for the most part, I wouldn't be sitting here with you having this interview. Race is a factor in this country, but I think the American people are a decent people. I think they are a generous people, and I think they are going to select who they think can best lead this country into a safer, more prosperous future. Are there going to be people who don't vote for me because of race? Sure. There are probably going to be people who don't vote for John McCain because they don't like Westerners, or or people who don't vote for me because they think I'm too young. I mean, there are going to be all kinds of reasons why people select one candidate over the other, and there's no doubt that in some cases race may be a factor. The overwhelming majority of Americans, I think, will give me a fair hearing, and they're going to make a decision based on, is this the guy who we think can make our health care premiums lower? Is this the guy who is actually going to break the addiction we have to foreign oil? Is this somebody who can responsibly get us out of Iraq and allow us to reinvest those billions of dollars into rebuilding the infrastructure here in America? Is this somebody who is going to help me educate my kids and send my kids to college? If they think I can do that, if they think I'm the best person for the job, I'll get their vote.
And if they hold your race against you?
Well, there's nothing I can do about that. It's it is what it is.
And finally, you have two little girls,
Yeah.
Sasha and Malia, 6 and 9 now,
Yeah.
right?
Soon to be 7 and 10.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure they appreciate that. Do you have any concerns about raising your daughters under the glare of the spotlight if you're elected?
Yes. Yeah. This is something Michelle and I spent a lot of time talking about even before we got into this race. And frankly, I might not have gotten into this race had they been older, because I think it's probably even more difficult for a teenager.
I'll attest to that.
To suddenly, be thrust into that kind of situation. So far, we've been able to create, Michelle has been able to create this bubble of normalcy around them. And they are just they're just magical kids, and they're happy, and they're fun, and they're polite, and they have friends who they've known for years before.
You're completely objective about this, too.
I am not objective, but I can get testimonies from everybody who knows them. But I do worry. Look, there's no doubt that if I'm successful, it's been a long time since young children were in the White House, and figuring out how to do that, especially in this 24/7 news cycle, is something that we'll have to figure out. And that may be the only place where I really expect the press to help. I mean, I think everything's fair game, but should I be successful in this endeavor, I would hope that everybody involved in the media would say, these guys are parents too, and so let's give those kids a little bit of space.
The Clintons did a pretty good job of that, didn't they?
They did, and I think Chelsea Clinton is a remarkable young woman. And I remember we were in Iowa at the JJ dinner, and Michelle went over to talk to Hillary. They hadn't spoken much. Their paths hadn't crossed during the campaign. But the one thing Michelle made a point of saying is that, I'm so impressed with how well you've raised your daughter. And that's a testament to them. I'm sure it was tough, but she's a remarkable young lady.
Did you ever think you'd see this day? I mean, are you still just completely...
Well, I will tell you, in somewhere right after Texas and Ohio and before Pennsylvania, I didn't. I thought, this is taking forever. It's been a long haul, but look, it doesn't sink in right away. You got too much stuff to do. There'll be a point sometime, I'm sure, maybe this weekend, where or maybe I'm sitting out on my porch and maybe Michelle will be next to me, and I'll say, how about that? And then I'll have to get back to work.